Picture this. You're 26 years old, drowning in medical bills, watching your little sister fight cancer with treatments your family can't afford. Then someone offers you $25,000 for one weekend. Most people would walk away. She didn't. And by 35, she had earned $29 million. But here's what nobody tells you about that kind of money. It came with a price that almost destroyed her soul. Tonight, I'm going to share the real story of Madison Parker, a name I've changed to protect someone who trusted me with the truth. A truth so raw, so shocking, that when she first told me about the briefcases full of cash, the private jets to Dubai, the billionaires who paid more for her silence than most people earn in a lifetime, I didn't believe her. Until she showed me the bank statements, until she showed me the scars. This isn't just about money. This is about what happens when desperation meets opportunity, when survival instincts override moral compasses, and when someone discovers that the most expensive thing in the world isn't what you buy, but what you sell of yourself to get it. Because Madison didn't just earn $29 million, she paid for every single cent, with pieces of her identity, her relationships, her peace of mind, and very nearly, her life. Before we go deeper into this story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Madison's story doesn't start in penthouse suites or exclusive clubs. It starts in a cramped hospital waiting room in Ohio, where she sat holding her 19-year-old sister Emma's hand, while doctors delivered news that would change everything. Stage 3 lymphoma. Aggressive treatment required. Insurance would cover 60%. Maybe. The remaining bills? $250,000 minimum. For a family already stretched thin by her father's recent layoff and her mother working double shifts at a local diner, it might as well have been $2 million. Madison was 26 then, fresh out of graduate school with a marketing degree and $48,000 in student loans. She'd been working at a small advertising firm in Columbus, making $31,000 a year and living paycheck to paycheck. Every morning she'd drive past billboards advertising luxury cars she'd never afford, designer stores she'd never enter, and restaurants where a single meal cost more than her weekly grocery budget. She'd accepted this as normal, until Emma got sick. The turning point came 3 months later at a coffee shop in downtown Columbus. Madison was reviewing yet another insurance denial letter, trying to figure out how to appeal, when she overheard two women at the next table talking about money. Serious money. One woman, probably in her early 30s, was casually mentioning how she'd made $15,000 the previous weekend in Miami. The other asked about the arrangement, and the first woman lowered her voice. But Madison caught fragments. Exclusive clients. Complete discretion. High-end companionship. Most people would have minded their own business. But when you're watching your sister waste away because you can't afford to save her, you listen to conversations about $15,000 weekends. Madison waited until one of the women went to the bathroom, then did something completely out of character. She approached the other woman directly. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely steady. "I couldn't help but overhear. I'm in a desperate situation with my sister's medical bills. Could you tell me more about what you do?" The woman, who introduced herself as Victoria, studied Madison carefully. Pretty, educated, well-spoken, and most importantly, genuinely desperate. Victoria handed her a business card with just a phone number and said, "Think carefully about this. Once you cross this line, you can never really go back. The money is real, but so are the consequences. Call me in 48 hours if you're serious." That night, Madison sat in Emma's hospital room, watching her sister sleep between chemotherapy sessions. Emma had lost 25 pounds, her hair was gone, and the medical equipment monitoring her vital signs beeped constantly through the night. The latest bill had arrived that morning, $67,000 for the past month alone. Their parents had already mortgaged the house, maxed out credit cards, and were discussing bankruptcy. Emma had even mentioned stopping treatment to spare the family financial ruin. Madison pulled out Victoria's card and stared at the phone number for hours. She thought about her master's degree in marketing, about the career she'd planned, about the person she'd always believed herself to be. Then she looked at Emma, pale and fragile under harsh hospital lighting, and realized that person was a luxury she could no longer afford. She typed the number into her phone but didn't call. Not yet. The next morning brought another insurance denial and a call from the billing department asking about payment arrangements they couldn't possibly make. Madison's mother broke down crying in the hospital cafeteria, and her father aged 10 years and 10 minutes as he tried to comfort his wife while calculating impossible numbers on a napkin. That afternoon, Emma had a particularly difficult reaction to treatment, and Madison watched her little sister, who used to be the strongest person she knew, struggle to keep down sips of water. That evening, exactly 47 hours after Victoria had given her the card, Madison made the call that would change everything. "I'm serious," she said when Victoria answered. "I need to know more." Victoria's response was immediate. "Meet me tomorrow at the Ritz downtown. Lobby bar, 7 p.m., dressed professionally, and Madison. Once we have this conversation, there's no going back to pretending you never knew this world existed. If you've ever felt trapped by circumstances beyond your control, if you've ever faced impossible choices between survival and values, type 'I understand' in the comments. Because what Madison was about to discover would test every moral boundary she thought she had. The Ritz-Carlton lobby felt like stepping into a different universe. Madison had worn her best interview suit, a modest black ensemble from Target, but she felt underdressed among the marble columns, crystal chandeliers, and women wearing single pieces of jewelry worth more than her annual salary. Victoria appeared at exactly 7 p.m., looking like she belonged in this world of wealth. Designer dress, perfect makeup, confidence that radiated from every gesture. Before we discuss anything specific, Victoria began once they were seated in a quiet corner. "You need to understand what high-end companionship actually means. These aren't random encounters. These are sophisticated businessmen, politicians, celebrities, people who value discretion above everything else. They're not looking for quick transactions. They want intelligent conversation, someone who can accompany them to social events, someone who understands their world. Yes, intimacy is often part of the arrangement, but it's never the entire arrangement." Madison listened as Victoria explained the rules. Complete confidentiality, professional appearance always maintained, no personal relationships with clients, regular health testing, and most importantly, never revealing real identities or personal details. The money reflects the level of discretion and sophistication expected. Victoria continued. "Weekend arrangements typically start at $15,000. Longer engagements, especially international travel, can be significantly more. I know women who've earned 6 figures in a single month." The numbers were staggering, but Victoria wasn't finished. "However, this lifestyle requires constant performance. You're never truly off duty when you're with a client. You need to be knowledgeable about current events, wine, art, politics. You're not just providing companionship, you're providing an experience. And Madison, once you start, word spreads among certain circles. The really wealthy clients pay premium rates for new faces, especially educated women who can blend seamlessly into their social circles." Madison's head was spinning with questions and doubts, but Victoria anticipated her concerns. "Take a month to think about this. If you decide to proceed, I'll arrange your first introduction. A prominent real estate developer who's been requesting someone with your background and appearance. 4-day engagement in New York, $28,000. All expenses covered, luxury accommodations, and if you handle yourself well, he has associates who pay considerably more." That night, Madison couldn't sleep. $28,000 for 4 days, more than half her annual salary. She could pay for Emma's next round of treatments, catch up on medical bills, and still have money left over. But she kept thinking about Victoria's warning. Once you cross this line, you can never really go back. What did that mean exactly? How would this change her? Could she really maintain a secret life that her family, friends, and colleagues would never know about? 3 weeks later, Emma's condition worsened suddenly. The doctors recommended an experimental treatment available only in Houston, costing $85,000 up front. Insurance wouldn't cover experimental procedures. Madison's parents looked at her with desperate hope, as if she might have a solution they hadn't considered. She did, but she couldn't tell them what it was. Madison called Victoria that evening. "I'm ready," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Set up the New York arrangement." Victoria's response was businesslike and immediate. "I'll email you preparation materials tomorrow. Study them carefully. Your client's name is James Richardson. He owns half the commercial real estate in Manhattan, and he's hosting a charity gala where you'll accompany him. Madison, or rather, from now on when you're working, your name is Sophia. Sophia Martinez. I've created a complete background for you. Art history major from Northwestern, currently working in gallery management. Memorize every detail." The transformation began immediately. Victoria arranged for professional styling, taught her about wine pairings, briefed her on current art exhibitions and political developments, and most importantly, coached her on maintaining the Sophia persona. "Never forget," Victoria emphasized during their final preparation session, "James Richardson is paying $28,000 not just for your company, but for the illusion that you're someone who naturally belongs in his world. The moment he suspects you're performing rather than being, the arrangement ends." Flying first class to New York felt surreal. Madison had never experienced luxury travel, but Sophia needed to act like this was routine. The designer dress Victoria had selected cost more than Madison's monthly rent, but Sophia wore it like she owned dozens similar. At the charity gala, she discussed contemporary art with museum curators, debated foreign policy with political consultants, and charmed business leaders with insights about market trends she'd researched obsessively. James Richardson was everything Victoria had described: sophisticated, powerful, and completely accustomed to having his desires fulfilled immediately. But he was also surprisingly respectful, genuinely interested in Sophia's opinions and clearly impressed by her intelligence. "Most companions can discuss fashion or celebrities," he told her during dinner at an exclusive private club. "But you actually understand the economic implications of the art market consolidation we were discussing earlier. That's refreshing." The 4 days passed in a blur of expensive restaurants, private museum tours, Broadway shows, and intimate conversations in Richardson's penthouse suite. Madison found herself genuinely enjoying aspects of the experience: the intellectual stimulation, the luxury accommodations, the feeling of being valued for her intelligence as well as her beauty. But she also discovered the emotional complexity Victoria had warned her about. Maintaining the Sophia persona required constant mental effort, and there were moments when she almost forgot which responses were authentically hers versus carefully crafted performance. When Richardson handed her an envelope containing $28,000 in cash on Sunday evening, Madison experienced a strange mixture of triumph and hollowness. She'd done it, earned more money in 4 days than she'd ever seen at once. But flying back to Ohio, she felt like she was returning from a different planet to a life that no longer quite fit. At the hospital that evening, she told her parents she'd received an unexpected work bonus and could cover Emma's experimental treatment in Houston. Their relief and gratitude were overwhelming, but Madison felt like she was watching the scene from outside her own body. She'd saved her sister's life by becoming someone else entirely, and she was already wondering if she could afford to stop being Sophia Martinez. If you're still following this story, if you're wondering whether Madison could maintain this double life without losing herself completely, comment, "Still here," because what happens next shows how quickly money and secrets can become their own kind of prison. Emma's experimental treatment worked. Within 6 weeks, her cancer markers had dropped dramatically, and doctors were using words like remission and promising recovery. Madison watched her sister regain weight, energy, and hope, and felt vindicated in her choices. The money had quite literally saved Emma's life, but it had also created an unexpected problem. Madison discovered she was exceptionally good at being Sophia Martinez, and wealthy men were willing to pay extraordinary amounts for her company. Word spread quietly through exclusive circles about the intelligent, sophisticated new companion who could discuss anything from quantum physics to wine vintages while looking stunning at charity galas. Within 3 months, Madison had more requests than she could possibly accept. Richardson recommended her to associates in Chicago, Miami, and Los Angeles. Each arrangement paid more than the last. $40,000 for a week in Aspen with a pharmaceutical executive, $65,000 for 10 days in Europe with a shipping magnate, $80,000 for a month-long arrangement with a tech billionaire during his divorce proceedings. The financial transformation was staggering. By her second year as Sophia, Madison had earned over $2 million. She paid off Emma's medical bills, her student loans, bought her parents a new house, and still had more money than she'd ever imagined possible. She opened multiple investment accounts under carefully structured financial arrangements Victoria had taught her, diversified into real estate, and hired discreet financial advisors who asked no questions about her income sources. But the psychological transformation was even more dramatic. Madison found herself becoming addicted to the lifestyle. The private jets, 5-star accommodations, designer everything, and most intoxicatingly, the power that came with financial independence. For the first time in her life, she never worried about money. Bills arrived and were paid immediately. She could buy anything she wanted, travel anywhere, experience luxuries she'd only read about in magazines. The work itself became increasingly surreal. She accompanied a Supreme Court justice to his daughter's wedding in Martha's Vineyard, spent New Year's Eve on a Russian oligarch's yacht in Monaco, and attended private dinners with Fortune 500 CEOs discussing billion-dollar mergers while she nodded intelligently and provided witty observations about market conditions she'd researched extensively. Victoria had been right about the evolution of client expectations. As Sophia's reputation grew, the arrangements became more elaborate and expensive. A pharmaceutical executive paid $150,000 for her to accompany him to medical conferences across Asia for 6 weeks, playing the role of his girlfriend while he entertained international business partners. A real estate mogul paid $200,000 for a 3-month arrangement where she lived in his Malibu mansion, attended Hollywood premieres as his partner, and provided the social credibility he needed during a hostile corporate takeover. The money was intoxicating, but Madison began experiencing unexpected side effects. She found herself analyzing every interaction through the lens of potential value, studying people's body language and conversational patterns with calculating precision she'd never possessed before. Shopping for clothes became an investment strategy rather than personal expression. Even casual conversations with friends and family felt performative, as if she was constantly managing multiple identities. More troubling were the moments when Madison realized she preferred being Sophia. Sophia was sophisticated, confident, financially secure, and intellectually stimulated by conversations with powerful, accomplished men. Madison was, who exactly? The desperate graduate student from Ohio seemed like a different person entirely, someone naive and financially vulnerable that she barely remembered being. The isolation was another unexpected consequence. Madison couldn't share her success with anyone except Victoria, and even those conversations focused on business rather than emotional support. She watched her college friends struggle with entry-level careers, student loans, and relationship problems that seemed trivial compared to her complex arrangements with billionaires. But she couldn't offer advice or financial help without revealing how she'd acquired her wealth. Her relationship with her family became particularly complicated. They knew she was successful in consulting work that required extensive travel, but they didn't understand the specifics of her income or lifestyle. Emma, now in complete remission, often expressed gratitude for Madison's financial support, but also worried about her sister's increasingly frequent absences and emotional distance. "You saved my life," Emma said during one rare weekend Madison was home, "but I feel like I barely know you anymore. You're so different, sophisticated, but also unreachable." By her 3rd year as Sophia, Madison was earning over $8 million annually. She owned properties in 4 cities, had investment portfolios managed by top-tier financial firms, and maintained relationships with some of the world's most powerful men. She'd achieved financial security beyond most people's wildest dreams, but she'd also created a life where authenticity felt dangerous and solitude felt terrifying. The psychological cost was becoming evident in ways she hadn't anticipated. Madison began experiencing anxiety attacks when arrangements ended and she returned to empty luxury apartments, wondering who she was when she wasn't performing for someone else. She'd developed insomnia, relying on expensive wine and prescription sleep aids to quiet her mind. Most disturbing, she'd stopped feeling genuine emotions during intimate moments, even in her rare personal relationships, as if that capacity had been compartmentalized away to protect Sophia's professional objectivity. But the money kept flowing, and each new arrangement promised even more extraordinary experiences and financial rewards. A Middle Eastern prince offered $500,000 for a month in Dubai. A cryptocurrency billionaire wanted to pay $750,000 for Sophia to accompany him during his IPO roadshow across Europe and Asia. The numbers were becoming so large they felt abstract, but Madison couldn't resist the next level of financial security they represented. What she didn't realize was that the money was no longer just changing her bank account. It was rewiring her brain, her relationships, and her fundamental understanding of her own worth. She was about to discover that some prices are paid not in dollars, but in pieces of soul that can never be recovered. How would you feel if you discovered that financial success came at the cost of losing yourself completely? Comment below, because Madison was about to learn that even $29 million can't buy back what she was about to lose. The arrangement that changed everything started like any other. A week in Singapore with David Chen, a tech entrepreneur worth approximately $3 billion. Victoria had presented it as routine, $500,000 for accompanying Chen to various business dinners and social events while he finalized a major acquisition. Sophia had handled dozens of similar arrangements without incident. But David Chen wasn't like Madison's previous clients, and Singapore became the place where her carefully constructed double life finally shattered. The first warning sign was Chen's unusual level of interest in Sophia's personal background. Most clients maintained professional boundaries, enjoying the illusion of intimacy without probing for authentic details. Chen asked specific questions about her childhood, her family, her real aspirations. Questions that required increasingly elaborate lies to maintain the Sophia Martinez persona. He seemed to enjoy testing her stories for consistency, as if he suspected she wasn't who she claimed to be. By the third day, Madison realized Chen had been investigating her. During dinner at an exclusive restaurant, he casually mentioned details about her real education, her family in Ohio, even Emma's cancer treatment. "I find you fascinating, Sophia. Or should I say Madison?" he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Most companions are exactly what they appear to be. But you're something different. You're genuinely intelligent, genuinely educated, from a genuinely middle-class background. That authenticity makes you valuable in ways you probably don't understand." Madison's blood ran cold, but she maintained her composure. "I think there's been some misunderstanding," she replied carefully. "Perhaps we should discuss any concerns with Victoria." Chen laughed softly and pulled out his phone, showing her photographs. Madison at the hospital with Emma, Madison at her parents' house in Ohio, Madison at her old job in Columbus. "I know exactly who you are," he said. "The question is, what's that information worth to you?" What followed was the most terrifying conversation of Madison's life. Chen explained that he collected information about people he found interesting, not necessarily for malicious purposes, but because knowledge was power and power was valuable. He had no intention of exposing her identity, he assured her, but he wanted to modify their arrangement. Instead of 1 week in Singapore, he wanted Sophia to become available exclusively to him for 6 months. Instead of $500,000, he was offering $2 million, but with conditions that made Madison's skin crawl. "You see," Chen continued as if discussing weather, "most wealthy men can buy companionship easily. But what we can't buy is the psychological satisfaction of truly owning someone. You've built this elaborate identity, this sophisticated persona, this financial independence. And I want to watch you surrender all of that voluntarily. For enough money, of course. The thrill isn't in forcing submission, it's in pricing it correctly. Madison tried to leave that evening, but Chen had anticipated her reaction. He'd already contacted Victoria, explaining that their arrangement was being extended indefinitely and that any interference would result in unfortunate publicity for everyone involved. He'd researched Madison's family, her sister's continued medical expenses, her parents' financial situation. "You've built a house of cards financially and personally," he explained matter-of-factly. "I'm not threatening to destroy it. I'm offering to buy it. $2 million for 6 months of complete availability. No other clients, no personal relationships, no contact with family except through me. Just you, me, and whatever I decide we should do with our time together." That night, locked in Chen's Singapore penthouse guest room, Madison experienced a complete psychological breakdown. She'd spent years believing she was in control of her arrangements, that she was leveraging her intelligence and beauty to build financial security while maintaining personal autonomy. But Chen had shown her how illusory that control had always been. Every client had known exactly what she was, had access to resources that could destroy her constructed identity whenever they chose, and most terrifyingly, had been evaluating not just her company, but her vulnerability. The realization that followed was even worse. Madison reviewed every arrangement she'd accepted over the past 3 years, and recognized signs she'd ignored or rationalized away. The pharmaceutical executive who'd insisted she cut contact with friends during their Asian tour. The real estate mogul who'd monitored her communications while she lived in his Malibu house. The Supreme Court justice who'd made casual comments about her family that he shouldn't have known. They'd all been testing boundaries, conditioning her to accept increasing levels of control, preparing her for exactly the situation Chen was now proposing. She'd thought she was building wealth and independence, but she'd actually been training herself for sophisticated imprisonment. Every luxury she'd accepted, every boundary she'd compromised, every authentic emotion she'd suppressed to maintain her professional persona, it had all been leading to this moment when someone would finally offer to buy not just her time or her body, but her entire existence. Madison spent 3 days in Chen's penthouse, pretending to consider his offer while desperately trying to figure out escape options. But every scenario she imagined ended with exposure, financial ruin, and destruction of the life she'd built for her family. Chen had calculated her price perfectly, not just the $2 million, but the cost of refusing him. He could destroy Sophia Martinez's reputation among exclusive clients, expose Madison Parker's real identity to her family and former colleagues, and ensure she never worked in any legitimate field again. On the 4th morning, Madison made a decision that surprised even her. Instead of accepting or refusing Chen's proposal, she told him she needed to return to the United States immediately to handle a family emergency. She would give him an answer within 1 week. Chen agreed, confident that time would work in his favor, that Madison would realize she had no choice but to accept his terms. But during the flight back to Ohio, Madison experienced something she hadn't felt in years: absolute clarity about who she wanted to be. For the first time since becoming Sophia Martinez, she stopped calculating financial outcomes and started evaluating the actual cost of her choices. She'd saved Emma's life and secured her family's future, but she'd also created a situation where her entire existence could be purchased by anyone with sufficient resources and information. That realization led to the most difficult decision of her life, one that would cost her everything she'd built financially, but might save whatever authentic self she had left. What would you have done in Madison's position? When survival and dignity conflict, when financial security comes at the cost of personal freedom, what price is too high? Comment below, because what Madison decided next shocked everyone, including herself. Madison never returned David Chen's calls. Instead, she did something that Victoria said was professional suicide, and her accountant said was financial insanity. She walked away from everything. Not gradually, Not strategically, but completely and immediately. She contacted every client with pending arrangements and canceled them, forfeiting substantial deposits and burning bridges that had taken years to build. She liquidated investment portfolios, sold properties, and prepared to disappear from the world that had made her wealthy, but nearly cost her soul. The financial cost was staggering. Madison had earned $29 million over 4 years, but walking away from active arrangements and losing anticipated future income reduced her liquid assets to approximately $8 million. Still an enormous sum, but leaving that lifestyle meant abandoning the social connections, luxury accommodations, and business relationships that had made such earning potential possible. She was essentially retiring from the most lucrative career she'd ever imagined, with no possibility of return. Victoria was furious and bewildered. "You've built something extraordinary," she argued during their final conversation. "Chen is one client among dozens. You could simply refuse his arrangement and continue with others. Why destroy everything over one difficult situation?" But Madison had realized something Victoria couldn't understand. Chen wasn't an anomaly. He was the inevitable conclusion of the path she'd been traveling. Every client relationship had been conditioning her for exactly that level of control and objectification. The only difference was that Chen had been honest about his intentions. The psychological withdrawal from being Sophia Martinez was more difficult than Madison had anticipated. She'd spent 4 years developing sophisticated knowledge, refined tastes, and social confidence that felt integral to her identity. Returning to a simpler lifestyle felt like losing parts of herself she'd genuinely valued. She missed the intellectual stimulation of conversations with powerful, accomplished people. She missed the financial security that allowed her to help her family without sacrifice. Most surprisingly, she missed feeling desired and valued, even artificially, by men who could afford anything they wanted. But she also discovered aspects of herself that had been suppressed during her years as Sophia. Madison began experiencing genuine emotions again. Not strategic responses designed to please clients, but authentic reactions to everyday experiences. She laughed spontaneously for the first time in years while watching a comedy with Emma. She cried during sad movies instead of maintaining composed professionalism. She felt nervous asking someone on a legitimate date, remembering what it meant to be vulnerable with someone who wasn't paying for her company. The readjustment to authentic relationships was particularly challenging. Madison had become so accustomed to interactions with clear transactional boundaries that navigating genuine friendships and potential romantic relationships felt impossibly complex. How do you explain a 4-year gap in your social life? How do you relate to people whose financial concerns seem insignificant compared to arrangements you've handled? How do you trust your own emotions when you've spent years training yourself to perform them? Emma, now healthy and completing graduate school herself, became Madison's closest confidant during this transition. Without knowing specific details about Madison's work, Emma understood that her sister had sacrificed something significant to ensure her medical treatment was funded. "You saved my life," Emma told Madison during one of their long conversations about identity and authenticity, "but I don't want that to cost you yours. Whatever you did, whatever you gave up, I want you to find a way to be happy that doesn't require performing for anyone else." Madison used her remaining financial resources to establish a foundation focused on medical bill assistance for families facing catastrophic illnesses. It was, she realized, a way to transform her complicated earnings into something unambiguously positive, while addressing the exact problem that had driven her original decisions. The foundation allowed her to help other families avoid the impossible choices she'd faced while creating legitimate work that provided meaning beyond financial compensation. 18 months after leaving Singapore, Madison received a final communication from David Chen. Not a threat or demand, but a simple message expressing genuine respect for her decision to walk away from his offer. "Most people," he wrote, "can be purchased eventually if you identify the correct price and pressure points. You surprised me by demonstrating that some things truly aren't for sale. That's rare and admirable." The message disturbed Madison because it confirmed her worst fears about the world she'd inhabited. Chen and clients like him hadn't viewed her as a sophisticated companion providing valuable services, but as a commodity whose resistance could be overcome with sufficient financial pressure and psychological manipulation. Her escape hadn't been a rejection of one problematic client, but a recognition that the entire system was designed to erode personal autonomy gradually until surrender felt inevitable. 2 years after her final arrangement, Madison met someone, a social worker named Michael who worked with at-risk youth and had no idea about her previous life. Their relationship developed slowly, built on genuine compatibility rather than performance or transaction. Michael was attracted to Madison's intelligence and empathy, qualities that had nothing to do with designer clothes or sophisticated lifestyle knowledge. For the first time in years, Madison felt valued for characteristics that were authentically hers, rather than carefully constructed to please someone else. But even positive new relationships carried complications. Madison struggled with anxiety about disclosure, wondering whether Michael deserved to know about her past, whether their connection could survive that knowledge, whether she could build authentic intimacy while maintaining such significant secrets. She'd learned to compartmentalize so effectively as Sophia that emotional integration felt like learning a foreign language. The healing process was ongoing and non-linear. Some days Madison felt grateful for her experiences, recognizing that her years as Sophia had provided financial security, expanded her worldview, and developed capabilities she valued. Other days, she felt profound grief for the person she might have become without those compromises, for relationships she'd never allowed herself to develop, for aspects of her personality that had been suppressed or lost entirely. But gradually, Madison began integrating the different parts of her experience into a more complete understanding of herself. She'd made extreme choices under extreme circumstances, and those choices had consequences both positive and negative that would affect her permanently. The key was learning to accept responsibility for her decisions while forgiving herself for the context that had necessitated them. Today, Madison Parker lives quietly in a mid-sized city where nobody knows about Sophia Martinez. She runs her medical assistance foundation, maintains a modest lifestyle, and is engaged to Michael, who eventually learned about her past and chose to stay. She kept approximately $3 million from her earnings, enough to ensure she never faces financial desperation again, but not enough to live luxuriously without working. People ask me if I regret what I did, Madison told me during our final interview, and the honest answer is, it's complicated. I regret that I was forced into a situation where those seemed like my only options. I regret some of the choices I made along the way, the boundaries I compromised, the person I became in order to survive in that world. But I don't regret saving Emma's life, and I don't regret discovering that I'm strong enough to walk away from $29 million when the cost became higher than I was willing to pay. Madison's story raises uncomfortable questions about desperation, survival, and the price of financial security in a society where medical catastrophe can destroy families financially. Her choices were extreme, but they were made in response to extreme circumstances that many American families face every day. The difference was that Madison found a way to earn the money she needed, while most people in similar situations simply go bankrupt or watch their loved ones suffer. The hardest part, Madison reflected, wasn't earning the money or even leaving it behind. The hardest part was realizing that I'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone whose entire existence could be purchased by anyone with sufficient resources. I'd thought I was in control because I was making choices, but I'd actually surrendered control gradually, one compromise at a time until I was trapped in a life that felt more like elaborate imprisonment than freedom. But Madison also wanted people to understand that her story wasn't just about victimization or exploitation. I made adult decisions with full knowledge of the risks involved, she emphasized. I developed skills, confidence, and knowledge that have value beyond those specific circumstances. I learned things about human nature, power dynamics, and my own capabilities that I couldn't have learned any other way. The experience was traumatic in many ways, but it was also educational in ways I'm still processing. Her final message was both warning and hope. If you're facing impossible financial pressures, If you're considering choices that compromise your values for survival, remember that every compromise makes the next one easier, and eventually you may find yourself in situations you never intended to accept. But also remember that it's never too late to reclaim your authentic self, even if it costs everything you've built artificially. Madison Parker earned $29 million before she turned 35. But the richest day of her life was the day she chose freedom over financial security, authenticity over performance, and self-respect over wealth. It was the day she remembered that some things truly cannot be bought or sold, including the right to determine who you become and how you spend your life. What do you think about Madison's story? Was the money worth the price she paid? Could you have walked away from that level of financial security? And most importantly, what would you do if faced with impossible choices between survival and values? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about your own relationship with money, security, and authenticity, subscribe for more real stories that explore what it truly costs to build the life you want. Sometimes the most expensive purchases aren't made with money, but with pieces of yourself you can never get back. Madison learned that lesson at the cost of $29 million, but she also learned that some things are worth more than any price you could pay or any amount someone could offer. Her story reminds us that true wealth isn't measured in bank account balances, but in the ability to look at yourself in the mirror and recognize the person looking back. The question that haunts Madison most isn't whether she made the right choice in walking away. It's wondering how many other women are trapped in similar cycles right now, trading pieces of their identity for financial survival, believing they're in control while slowly surrendering their autonomy to people who view them as sophisticated commodities rather than human beings. Every time I see news stories about medical bankruptcies or families struggling with catastrophic illness expenses, Madison told me, I wonder how many of them are facing the same impossible choices I faced. How many are discovering that desperation makes you consider options you never thought possible? How many are learning that survival sometimes requires becoming someone you never wanted to be? Her story isn't just about one woman's journey through wealth and back to authenticity. It's about a system that creates situations where intelligent, educated, moral people find themselves making choices that seem unthinkable until they become necessary. It's about the hidden costs of financial desperation and the psychological price of transforming yourself into whatever someone else is willing to pay for. But perhaps most importantly, Madison's story is proof that redemption is possible, that authenticity can be reclaimed, and that walking away from everything you've built artificially can be the first step toward building something genuine. She lost $29 million, but she found herself. And in a world where so many people feel trapped by financial pressures, social expectations, and the constant demand to perform rather than simply be, maybe that's the most valuable lesson of all. I used to think freedom meant having enough money to do whatever I wanted, Madison concluded. Now I understand that freedom means being able to choose who you become, regardless of what anyone else is willing to pay for. That kind of freedom, that's truly priceless. If Madison's story resonates with you, if it makes you think about your own relationship with money, authenticity, and the prices we pay for security, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the most powerful gift we can give someone is the reminder that they're worth more than any price someone might offer, and that it's never too late to choose authenticity over artificial success. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for caring enough about real human stories to stay with us through Madison's entire journey. Your engagement, your comments, your willingness to grapple with difficult questions about survival and values, that's what makes telling these stories worthwhile. Until next time, remember that your story matters, your choices matter, and you always have more control over who you become than circumstances might suggest.